Hey guys, Art13131 here, and we're still in week 6. Talk about assignment number 11 and the homework. Assignment 11 is drawing with shading and no lines. So I'll show you what that means, and then the homework is drawing a tree with personality and a title. You're going to make a title for it, and that's got to do with what personality or character the tree has that you drew into the tree. Um, Basically, this is a really good example of drawing with no lines. It's all shading. So there's no lines like writing lines, right? With the tip of the pencil. They might have shaded part of this with the tip of the pencil, but very well done so that it doesn't look like lines. But typically, most of this is probably done with the side of the pencil or a graphite pencil side of that, or charcoal. I don't think it doesn't really look like charcoal, but it might be. Yeah, it is. But you can still get the same results with graphite, relatively. But you'll see that there's no border line around anything. Around the nose, around the mouth, around the lips, or around the side of the face, or anything to border. That's basically where artists can put borders to support something, but typically they're really not there. Lines. There's no lines that border everything. It's just shading that meets up with other shades. Show you some other examples on Bing here. And then there's several drawings in here. Some of them have lines and some of them don't. So you have to really sort of learn to start recognizing what isn't. Like this banana. This is the shades that meet up with other shades without a border line to define their edge, or a border line to define that edge. There's a slight shading line right here, but it's not bold. It's just because probably, and they wouldn't have needed it if they'd darkened up the background back here, like they did here. It sort of separates the background from the banana because the tones are very similar right there. But then, they probably wouldn't have needed it if they'd had put some tone back here, like this light tone here, or this sort of tone. But it's okay to have that sort of a shading line, which isn't bold and it isn't continuous around the whole banana. Okay. I think that's what I'm trying to get across. And the cast shadow is just a cast shadow without a border line, or that's a lighter tone than a borderline would have been. So this is a pretty good example of that kind of thing. This one is in a way, there are some lines in here to define parts of this, but it's not a continuous bold line around anything. So that's sort of okay. There's some stronger drawings without lines in here, though. The dog. It's just shading, and then some of it is very thin shading, like around in the teeth and everything. But they're not lines. These are considered shading marks. There's some lines that make up the fur, but they work with other in a way that shows shading and light highlights right here on the fur, darker area highlights. So they're considered more like shading lines because they're not continuous and bold. They change as they are used in the contour of the face. Wherever they whip around, they get lighter and darker. Meaning basically you've left areas that don't have a lot of line in there for the fur, and you have areas where there's more lines, and it makes it darker. And how they made that light there is either by erasing it out with a really thin eraser tip. They make them that you can buy those. It's kind of like a pencil, but it's an eraser, and then you can keep sharpening it. And they left areas that were void of any graphite or chalk. That's how they basically do that. Let's see what else we got here. Not that many more examples. Let me show you something that I think would show something with lines in it if I can find it again. Yeah, it might be over here. Okay, like this, there's border lines on everything. You see them? The cube, this cone, and around here, and a lot of border lines. So it's not really accurate. If you really look at subject matter, there aren't lines there. I mean, mostly there's not. I mean, unless they are drawn in, or because of the lighting, they're showing up. But most items you put out will not have a border line like that around it. So that's what I'm trying to get away from when you're drawing. Like this one. See the lines in here? Well, that could have been done with if you had made the tones differently, that this met up with the other tones. You wouldn't have needed those lines. This one, pretty much this is tones meeting up with other tones. I see a slight little border line there, but not bad. Certainly the whole thing does not have a border line around it. There's a little bit of a line here because this is such a reflective area in here that they needed that to show the difference. But so I know that it can be used to, and you might be used, but typically try not to use it when you're doing this project. Like these. These are shades that are meeting up with each other. There's no border line right in here. There's a slight one right here because the tones are so similar. Now, if they had darkened up the tones here or slightly here, they would have separated without that line. The ball doesn't really have a line around it either. So this is more of what I'm talking about. So shading without the use of border lines or any lines to start defining everything. This is a pretty good example. There's a dark shading line here. I call it a shading line because it's kind of more bold than a writing line, and it changes slightly. Under here where it's really dark, and they're defining the difference between the pot and the surface with that kind of a shading line. But it's not continuously used around the whole item. And here and all that. These are tones that are meeting up with other tones. Because this is a darker tone and darker here, everything is separated. So that's a little lighter right there, but it gets dark here. And this is a little lighter than there. That's darker than there in the background. So they all separate. When you're using a background, and you got your subject, try to separate by using different tones that aren't really super similar, and then you don't need the line to define the difference. So you can go through here and get other ideas. I think you should put up items or an item and draw it. This one's a good one too. This is more accurate to real life. When you use the lines, they're not really there. You think you need them to make it a stronger drawing, but it isn't helping in a realistic way. It may be strong, but it's not accurate. There's really no border lines. Okay, so that's my big point, and that's what I'm trying to outline here. This one, same thing. They're using the shading. It ends there and another shade starts. Ends there, another shade starts. And they're using the background, darker and lighter, wherever things meet with the subject matter. Lighter, darker, darker, lighter, lighter, darker, darker with a little reflection area here, which is accurate. So it's light right there and then gets dark. We talked about this in the first videos about shading. Here's your 7 levels of tone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, 10 levels of tone. I'm just asking for 7, you know. It's something you can actually get 10, but at least 7, right? Because there's that many variations that you can get from shading. It just depends on how much pressure you're putting on the pencil to get the graphite rendered. All right, so I think we've got this one. It can just be an item. It doesn't have to be a guy's face like I showed before. But this is the spectrum you're working with. You can have something very intricate like this or something a little more simple, depending on what you want to challenge yourself with and what your skill level you feel is. So if you're really good at this and you have had experience, challenge yourself a little more. If you're a beginner or super beginner and you're a little bit challenged just by possibly pulling this off at all, then go for the more simple item. But definitely use the shading. All right, so we're going to talk about the homework, which is trees with personality. Now, don't do cartoon stuff like this. Although that is very cool, and so is this. If you want to go here, it's a little more, got more content to me. It's more, the shape of the tree and everything does speak more of spooky, and it's not real silly and necessarily. I mean, it does have a little more content, and you can even have spooky trees like this that are alluding to a figure of a human possible aspect or a face in there. But it's very subtle. This is more along the lines of being, artistic and showing a personality or a character in a tree without actually drawing a face on it. So this goes on and on and on in here. The one I wanted to show you, and I don't know where it is now. Let's see. Oh. So these don't have faces, but as you can see, a pleasant lady, a crabby old man. You see the idea here? Crabby, kind of bent and wrinkled and gnarly looking tree. And trees can look like that. This one says graceful maiden. So, and the bride has little flowers on it and very subtle branches. An awkward youth, so it's coming up and it's kind of not defined correctly here and there. Things are kind of awkward and grown here but not here type of idea. So that these are tree characters. And so again, what I'm asking you to do, let's happy trees. Why did I put that in there? Let's put spooky trees and see what happens. So again, you have a face, but some of these are just like they are, right? So that's considered spooky. It could be considered crabby or old man or something like that too. It's up to you, but there's a lot of these in here. This is been used in a lot of film. Sleepy Hollow and Disney stuff, and even Wizard of Oz had kind of spooky, ugly looking trees. You can put a face in if it's very subtle like these. I don't mind that, but when it gets like this, it's a little bit too cartoony. These are cool. on it, and you might, like again, it's kind of alluding to an eye there or something. This could be a figure of a person in a tree, or they sort of have arms that go out and bending over and lurching over with fingers and stuff like that. So the spooky tree is a really good one to do, but be creative. Do something different than that. What else could I? How about a crazy tree? What's that look like? Yeah, they get a little more psychedelic here. I mean, you might go ahead and do something that like this. If it's really intricate like this is pretty cool. With an eye crying and all that. I'll go ahead and let that happen. But I'll accept stuff like that too. Some of these are really good. So get some ideas and come up with something creative. This, no, okay. Don't do this, please. Let's do something a little more creative and more artistic than that. This is pretty odd. That's pretty cool. So we can go abstract, okay? If you can put color into it, go ahead. We'll branch out here. Color's okay. Painting, whimsical, but have a title for it. Send it to me and title it. Whatever you're looking at. But it's got to have a tree in it. It has to have a personality or a character and a title. Okay? All right. Let's leave it at that. And then we're going to talk with you next week. Like I say, we're on the halfway mark. Past that now. So whatever you have looming in the past, all the prior assignments you haven't completed, send those to me so we can get some feedback. And you might have to ask you to do it again or do more to it, add to it, change it, adjust it for a better grade. All right? Then you have a chance to get that better grade without time running out on you at the end of the term. All right. So, this is pretty cool. Come out with a character title, a personality, a title for this that has to do with the tree, that relates to the tree's motion, its whatever movement is in that tree, whatever it's representing. All right.